I guess we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in to this very special live edition of NRI Talks. Before we get started, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in from all over the world. I'd also like to take a quick moment to thank the amazing team of Nayef Al-Rajhi Investments for making this possible and for continuing to support entrepreneurs from all around the world. Speaking of entrepreneur, today we are joined by an amazing guest who's managed to build a platform and organization that actually competes with Netflix. You heard me right. Let's take a look at today's guest. Run the report.
Maaz Sheikh brings more than 20 years experience in the media and telecom sectors, spanning technical, operational, sales and marketing functions at Fortune 100, as well as early-stage technology companies operating in the US, Europe, and the Middle East. Maaz spent a part of his childhood growing up in Dubai and returned to the region in 2006 to join Showtime Arabia, which is now known as OSN. As Chief Sales and Operations Officer at OSN, he was responsible for regional growth, customer service, and spearheading overall customer operations across the Middle East. As co-founder and CEO of Stars Play, Maaz inspires his team to deliver a new and highly anticipated digital media platform. Maaz Sheikh, along with his team, managed to build an organization and platform that competes with entertainment giant Netflix and is now the #1 streaming service in the MENA region. With its internet-savvy population, the region is a leader in adopting innovative technologies, and under Maaz's leadership, Stars Play is ushering in a bold new world of entertainment options.
And joining us live from Dubai is the co-founder and CEO of Stars Play, Maaz Sheikh. Maaz, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Maaz, could you not have found another giant to compete with besides Netflix?
Yeah, if life was only that easy and that simple.
Quick question. How do you guys stack up against Netflix when it comes to, let's say, market share, but most importantly, when it comes to technology?
I think, Netflix is still a global brand and a powerhouse. So the reality of competing with such a global player is not lost on us. But where they have global strengths, we find opportunity and our strengths in localization and being a regional player. This is not just a technology play either, right? This is about content as well, and this is between content and marketing and technologies where we find our strengths. But if you were to rank us head to head against Netflix on just technology, we're probably a few years behind them. Okay. We still have a lot of catching up to do. And
in terms of market share, you guys quite close?
Yeah, market share, look, there's few reports out there, but if you look at one of the more recent ones from IHS, they're considered a well-respected industry research. We are tied. We are tied with Netflix. Some reports have us #1, some have us #2, but IHS has us tied with Netflix on revenue and subscribers.
Well, listen, I mean, congratulations on a job very well done to you, to your team. The question is, when you actually set out to do this, did you think one day that you would be competing against Netflix? Did you see this happening?
Not to be honest, no, we didn't. When a team of us, got together and we got started, honestly, some of us were thinking, hey, if we can just make it past year 2 or 3, we'll consider that a success. So I don't think we got started with such lofty ambitions and goals. I think it was more, every day, one day at a time and step by step. Netflix launched maybe about 2 years after we did. And, leading up to that, once we found out Netflix was going to be launching in the region, it was a very, very scary and a daunting period for us. But for the first 6 or 7 months, actually the Netflix launch ended up being a good thing for us. because it did bring a lot of recognition in the industry, just in the region. And we rode that wave with Netflix of just that overall awareness.
Sorry to interrupt you. You left your job, your corporate job, at the peak of your career with OSN as Chief Sales Operations Officer in order to pursue your own dream and start your own business. And the reason I ask is because a lot of our viewers today are either entrepreneurs looking to start their own business or looking to grow and scale their business as we speak. So is there a right or wrong time for someone to say, you know what, I'm going to quit my job right now in pursuit of starting my own business? Is there a right or wrong time to do that?
Look, obviously, this is a very difficult question to answer. But if I were to look at my personal life and just reflect on it, I wish I'd done more entrepreneurial work when I first came out of college and university. And I perhaps did my first entrepreneurial venture in my mid-30s. And then did 2 ventures, and then the next one was Stars Play, maybe 10, 12 years later, since my first one. So everyone, the risk is much lower early on in your career because you don't have some of the personal commitments one carries once you're in your mid-40s. So I would say, from a risk perspective, the earlier in life, the better.
Okay, that's very good. The earlier, the better. Now, there's another follow-up question to this. As you said, starting a business is risky. Now, is there, let's say, a checklist per se that one should have before jumping into the world of the unknown called entrepreneurship? Or what are some of the main elements that one needs to secure before making such a decision and starting their own business and walking away from their existing job? What are some of the main elements somebody needs to secure, in your opinion?
Journey. And I think for me, Omar, what I will say is one has to have an ambition that's beyond just making a company successful or making money, because the path that one is taking as an entrepreneur can be a very, very bumpy one and a very unpredictable one. And you deal with scenarios that are not entirely in your control. So you find yourself reaching deep down to find exactly why you started that journey in the first place. So it can't be just about money or success, and there has to be something deeper behind it. Otherwise, it becomes a very lonely journey and a very difficult one.
Sure. Now, let's get to know Stars Play a little bit more in terms of territories. Where are you guys operational now, and where do you exist across how many countries, or what countries and regions?
We operate today in 3 regions. So Middle East, North Africa is one region where we're operating in 21 countries. We have also a service in Pakistan where we launched about a year and a half ago. And then we've also recently launched a business in India, which is not exactly Stars Play the way you see it in UAE, but we're licensing our technology and our platform to partners in India. So we're more of a technology provider in India rather than end customer service. Okay. So these are the 3 markets.
Fair enough. And now you guys also operate quite a bit in the Middle East. I think you're the #1 streaming service, or considered by many to be the #1 streaming service. I believe Saudi Arabia is probably your largest market today. Am I correct?
That's correct. So Saudis are by far our largest market.
Fair enough. And the reason I ask that is because many entrepreneurs today tend to structure an overly ambitious business plan or strategy when it comes to expansion. And they tend to overlook some of the fundamental elements, such as having good technology, which is key to any tech platform. So when it comes to that, people being focused on expansion rather than some of the fundamentals, what's your advice on how and when someone would be ready, or a business owner is ready to expand into new territories?
Look, I think expansion too quickly can be sometimes what takes a business down, right? And it can also be, you also need to capitalize on an opportunity if it presents itself, whether it's an additional market or additional product that one can launch. But I will say that for Stars Play, one of the reasons for our success has been staying focused on the market. So we did not expand into Pakistan until about 4.5 years, having focused on the Middle East and the Arab markets. So I would say focus is extremely important. Once you get your core markets down, I would suggest the next step is focusing on your unit economics for each customer and understanding how profitable your each subscriber or customer is, and then figuring out how you scale from there. But prioritizing your core markets first and then focusing on unit economics is extremely important before expanding too much too quickly.
Now, I'd like to say congratulations on the rounds of funding that you guys have raised. You've raised some quite large amounts, and I think your first round was around $40 million US. And you did so by partnering up with strategic key investors from within the industry. So the question here is for a lot of the viewers is, when is the right time to raise funding?
Omar, we got started with friends and family and seed investment from a Swedish firm. And that was in fact our first capital injection, which was about $1.5 million. And with that, we built out our technology and platform the way you see it today. We developed this initial basis. So with that technology and product in hand, that's when we started to look for institutional investors that were willing to fund the growth, and which is when we did our first Series A with $40 million of capital. So I would suggest if you're a technology focused company, the more you can do with friends and family or seed investment, and take your product development and your technology to a certain point where it's 70-80% complete, will give you the right valuation, pre-money valuation, before you go for your institutional investment. That's
precisely what I was looking for, is at what stage, because I've actually seen a lot of entrepreneurs who tend to raise large amounts too early on. And it tends to backfire on the actual business and operation. So so you're talking about roughly at about 70 or 80% of having your infrastructure together is probably a good time to raise funding.
Exactly. So for example, one of the tests before our shareholders today would invest in us, they wanted to test our platform and our technology end to end. So that product that they tested was developed with the seed investment and friends and family capital that we had raised. And that also shows, because one of the things institutional investors want to see is that the management team and the founders are committed behind this venture. So they like to see some history of you having left your previous job and have some scars on your back to show, and you put in some of your own personal skin in the game. Sure. So those are some of the elements that become critical before you do a Series A with institutional investors.
Okay, now since we're on the topic of funding, obviously having the right investors can really either help a startup and it could also hurt it, as we mentioned. How do business owners or entrepreneurs go about selecting the right investors for their venture?
So what we experienced, or what I experienced in my learning over the years was, we had over 100 meetings with different investors. And, even with the meetings you get rejected and you get a no, there's always some learning associated with it. So for me, I think sometimes investors tend to fall in love with the founding team or that one entrepreneur or that CEO, because they're looking for that Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos type of a character.
Or Maaz Sheikh in this case.
No, it's definitely not the same company. But I think sometimes that, most cases, right? Those are very exceptional cases of people that have changed industry. But for most of us mere mortals, it's not one person that creates the company, and investors ought to be looking at the depth of the team and who's behind the entire organization and who's going to take this idea forward, who's going to execute. a lot of founding CEOs tend to be, really good at selling the vision and selling the idea, but usually it takes a team. So what I would say as someone who's getting started as an entrepreneur, the flip side is have the right team around you. Realize that a single person cannot be the visionary, the product expert, the technologist, and the salesperson at the same time. Usually it takes a team, and it can come in any form. You can have part-time advisors, you can have people who are working with you, you can have co-founders, but you will need a set of skills around you.
Fair enough. Now, you're talking about having the right team, and that brings me to the next question, actually. Obviously, an organization's staff or team can literally make or break that organization. What sort of selection process should business owners, or even HR managers for that matter, follow when hiring specifically, let's say, senior managers who tend to influence other employees and set the right or maybe even wrong tone within a team? What sort of selection process would you advise to business owners and HR managers?
Sure. Again, it's a very personal thing. For me, I was fortunate enough to have been blessed with the team that I'd been working with, both at OSN, and part of the team came from HBO. And I had an opportunity to work with both teams before the organization came together. So I was in a very fortunate position that we got to build the chemistry, we got to know each other, and that team, gave me the opportunity to lead the organization in the long run and accepted me as the CEO. But as a hiring manager in the last 5 years, I have to admit I'm not the best person at hiring. So the way I compensate for that is I rely a lot on people around me, and I rely a lot on their feedback and judgment, rather than just myself. I tend to talk to someone and I like them, but that's not always the right decision. So I try to be objective when I'm going through their resume and looking for relevant experience. But I also rely a lot on my peer group to evaluate the person.
All right, Maaz, we have a few questions that have come in from our live audience. The first question comes from Riyadh, from Mohammed El Anazi in KSA, and he asks, how do we determine the right monthly or annual sales targets as a one-year-old web development company? We seem to always be in conflict with our investors, even though we have increased sales by an average of 8% over the past year.
Look, I think investors will always have higher expectations of you, and it's almost a given that whatever you are doing today, they will want more. It's their right. They're there to challenge you. It's very difficult to comment on whether 10% year on year is a good number or a bad number. It all depends on your industry and your product. But I definitely accept the fact that investors will always have high expectations. And as a general rule of thumb, you have to do better than what you did last year, always. Now,
I'm going to try to take that same question and reflect it on you. What do you implement on your team as a tech or streaming service platform in terms of monthly or annual growth?
Sure. So we have been, if you average out our growth over the last 5 years, Omar, we've been growing about 70 to 80% year on year. Of course, earlier years, the growth was much higher, 300-400% year on year. Last year, between 19 and 20 so far, we're trending at about 50% growth year on year.
All right, and the second question comes from Mohammed in Abu Dhabi, and he asks, we are a boutique social media agency that has lost nearly 70% of our clients due to the current pandemic and marketing budgets being cut. Yet we have retained all 10 of our employees at full pay. How can I reduce salaries without the risk of losing my staff, especially to my competitors, which is my main fear?
So I can definitely relate to this one in the sense that we went through a similar exercise a few months ago. What I would suggest is having an open conversation with your team and your employees. So what we ended up doing at Stars Play is when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. I ended up having an honest conversation with the management team, and we as a team voluntarily took salary reductions collectively as a team. And I'm appreciative of the colleagues and the team that did that voluntarily. So I would suggest it's an open conversation with your employees, and because I think most people do understand the situation, and I'm sure they'll be supportive of they'd rather see the business and company survive through this period, even if that means that they have to take temporary salary reductions.
So having an open dialogue or a transparent dialogue with the team.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go on to the third question. We still have a little bit of time for a couple more questions. We have one from Mufid Hamza from Dubai as well, and he asks, we are an online service provider that expanded into Egypt recently, where there's a high demand on for our services, but we are struggling with online payments due to the low credit card penetration. Do you have any advice?
So there's especially in Egypt, the government has started several online payment initiatives. You should definitely look at those. There's also the option of working with telecom operators in Egypt like Orange and Vodafone and Etisalat, where they can enable mobile payments for you for your electronic sales online. So either it's government payment channels or the telecom operators in Egypt, Etisalat, Vodafone, and Orange.
Okay, so using telecom services to be able to actually collect payments, that's actually that's quite a great idea, and I think you guys apply that yourself. And I'll want to come back and just ask you about that very quickly, because it's very interesting how you guys were able to apply that. For now, let's take the next question, which comes from Mustafa Khalil from Jeddah in KSA, and he asks, my business partner and I seem to disagree often on our marketing spend as an online shopping platform. What percentage of our budgets or revenues should be allocated to marketing budgets?
So again, Mustafa, this is a very difficult one. Generally speaking, for a stable business that has been running for say 5 or 6 years, they will spend anywhere from 7 to 15% of their gross revenue on online marketing. For us as a company, when we first got started, the percentage was relatively high, but now we're in that 10% range annually of our overall revenue we're spending on marketing. But like I said, when you're first growing the business, that percentage is higher because your revenues are low and you're still trying to build the brand. The thing that I will also suggest is look, especially for Mustafa, is to look for ways to partner with existing brands that have more marketing clout than you. This way you have a wider reach and your marketing dollars go a lot further as well. So look for partnerships, especially in a market like Saudi, which is a big market, and your marketing investment can get diluted very quickly because you're operating such a big market.
Excellent. Let's take one more question. Next question just came in from Ismail Al Hassan from Kuwait. And he asks, I've been struggling with hiring programmers for my online insurance platform, as I am not a tech geek per se, but rather a business development person. And I've already hired and fired a handful of individuals. How do I find the right programmer given my lack of technical knowledge?
Sure. So what I would suggest to Ismail is find at least one person that Ismail can trust and enable him or her to do hire more programmers. Because if Ismail is a business development salesperson like myself, then you don't want to make those calls and make those decisions. So at least have one person by your side, someone you can trust with your technology decisions, including hiring of the right programmers. Otherwise, you'll keep hiring and firing and not get to your goals. But find at least one person that you can trust.
Fair enough. Now, Maaz, in closing, I actually personally have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, which is directly related to what we just spoke about, and that was the credit card penetration. I had heard from you once upon a time that as you guys entered Egypt, you realized there was a low credit card penetration, and so you guys discovered a solution, which was being able to deal with telecom companies. Is that what gave you an advantage when it came to competing against Netflix, and how did you come about that idea?
The idea of enabling mobile payments and working with telecom partners definitely ended up being the game changer for us. So if you think about it, Omar, we started with an idea to build a media and entertainment company. It took us about a year to realize we are more of an e-commerce company than we're an entertainment company. Then it took us about another 6 to 9 months to realize not only are we an e-commerce company, we're also a online payment solutions company, because we couldn't find products and services that were readily available that we could use. So this is perhaps a good lesson for other entrepreneurs out there, that you might set out solving one problem, but what you realize is that you have to solve some other problems as you go along with it. And for us, the payment solutions, online payment solutions, was definitely one of the ones that we addressed. And it's still, even after 5 years, continues to be one of our key competitive advantages against our competitors.
Now, Maaz, we've had quite a bit of questions pour in actually as we're speaking right now. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take all of them, but I'd like to mention to the viewers that if you submit your questions on our social media channels that appear right here at the bottom, we'll try to submit them to Maaz and try to get the answers for you. So make sure you log on to the social media channels and submit your questions there. Now, Maaz, in closing, if you have one piece of advice for all of our viewers, the entrepreneurs out there that are looking to make their dreams come true, what would that one piece of advice be to everybody who's watching?
Sure. Look, one piece of advice I would give is that as much as believing in your dreams and that conviction in your ideas is extremely important, I would say what's really important even beyond that is perhaps having the humility to accept that you've made mistakes and going back and reflecting on them and then fine-tuning. Because, very few of us get this right the first time around. So when you see things not working and you being wrong yourself, have the humility to reflect on it and go back and change and do it again.
Maaz, thank you very much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us live, that was Maaz Sheikh, the co-founder and CEO of Stars Play. Make sure you tune in and join us on the next episode, and be sure to visit us on our social media channels to interact and engage with us. Till then, we'll see you next time.